37425. We've got to begin with the Texas situation. So I have facts and figures on Texas. We all need to digest. It's actually kind of interesting. There's a media story here that's happening. It turns out, according to ERCOT, which is the Energy Reliability Council of Texas, they're in charge of the Texas power grid, that 80% of the Texas power grid is fossil fuels, 20% is solar and wind. And it's the 80% that had catastrophic problems. ERCOT did not do the necessary weatherizing that other states have done. It was Texas. Texas is hot. It doesn't do stuff like this. And so those things were not done, it seems, and that caused a large portion of the problem. It was natural gas. You had pumps freeze, you had machinery freeze, you had low natural gas pressure. The coal stack froze. The coal that is supposed to be put on the conveyor belts to go to the coal power plants, the coal itself froze, and so was not dropping onto the conveyor belts to go into the furnaces. The nuclear power was then triggered and overwhelmed and tripped and took itself offline. It is notable, one, that so many people who are skeptical of the green agenda and environmentalists rush to blame the windmills, and I myself saw the stuff online and was like, oh, windmills, they're to blame. Except 80% of the power grid in Texas isn't wind and solar, it's fossil fuel or nuclear. And that's what happened. But what is also extraordinary to me are the number of people in the media who have rushed out now to deny that solar and wind played a role in the problems. You've had multiple reporters, one from the New York Times in particular, very vocally saying it wasn't the windmills, it wasn't the wind turbines. Actually, it was. The wind itself, the wind turbines did freeze. We're in this weird realm where neither side is really interested in truth. They're interested in narrative. We need to just follow along with me here for just a moment. We've arrived at a point in the country where neither side is really interested in what actually happened. They're interested in how do you own the other side. What narrative can we build and sell that hurts the other side? When you're so focused on the narrative, you might miss stuff that's actually true. So on the right, a lot of us, myself included, are deeply skeptical of the Green New Deal BS because it is BS. And when we realize that the wind turbines are frozen and the solar panels are covered over with snow and Texas has gone dark as a result, well, we can immediately say, hey, look at this. This is a problem. And on Fox News, of course, on the opinion shows, they spend a copious amount of time pointing to the failures of the Green New Deal. And in fact, they are right. The other side has responded, though, and said, no, actually, it was all of your archaic fossil fuel technology that failed. Well, you know what? Guess what? They're right. Both sides are right. Neither side wants to actually get to what actually was the truth because both sides then have to answer for problems. So, how am I the guy in the middle here? Because I hate the Green New Deal stuff. I hate wind turbines and solar panels. I mean, I'd put them on my house, but the whole idea that, one of my problems with all of this stuff is, let's just take solar panels. The rare earth minerals and the like that we're digging up to do these things, the left pays no attention to the damage they're doing to ecosystems around the world to build their solar panels. They just want to sleep well at night knowing they're not putting out fossil fuels. Nope, you're just killing small African children, getting poisoning, cobalt poisoning, digging up your rare earth minerals. But you don't care about kids anyway. You're perfectly happy to have them aborted. This is a problem. This is a multifaceted issue, and nobody wants to paint a full picture of it. The fossil fuel system in Texas had problems. Machines froze. There were heaters to cover them. The natural gas pressure was reduced. Texas converted a lot of their fossil fuel power to natural gas because natural gas is cleaner burning, and there's a lot of it in Texas. But the pressure went down, pumps and valves and machines froze. The coal couldn't get out. Nuclear power tripped itself offline. So yes, 80% of Texas is not renewable energy. It is fossil fuel or nuclear based, and it failed. But yes, the solar panels failed when they were covered in snow. Yes, the wind turbines did freeze. The wind turbines couldn't pick up the slack because the wind turbines themselves froze. And to see a lot of reporters say, ha, 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 it was the fossil fuels, it was the fossil fuels. We should have more. You've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez out there as well chiming in. This is why we need more renewables. No, the renewables failed too, you idiot. And then, of course, you've got the media out there, not just mocking, but listen to this. How one Texas storm exposed an energy grid unprepared for climate change. Electric grid regulators said the U.S. will have to develop vast supplies of power storage, such as gigantic batteries that rely on emerging technologies. Really? Josh Lederman? He does an environmentalist beat and political reporter for NBC. I'm totally bought into the Green New Deal idea. A devastating winter storm that has plunged Texas into an electricity crisis offers warning signs for the U.S. as the Biden administration seeks to prepare for a future in which extreme weather is a greater risk and America is almost entirely powered by renewable energy. Energy generation is one challenge, but an equally daunting challenge centers on storing power from renewable energy for extreme events like the one hammering Texas. In Texas, the center of a wave of outages across the southern and central parts of the U.S., the primary electric grid suffered a 1-2 punch wrought by the deep freeze. Off the charts demand for power as Texans tried to heat their homes and power plants that simply failed to produce. Wind and solar, still fairly small slices of the state's energy mix, played only a minimal role in the sudden power outage, utility officials said, contrary to a wave of conservative critics who tried to falsely pin blame for the situation on renewable energy. No, actually, 20% of the power grid is wind and solar. That's still a lot, and that failed too. Notice the cover-up. But listen to one of the CEOs out here, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. That for batteries to play the ultimate backup system, we're so far away from that, it's not funny. To really make the vision that we'd like to go to a highly decarbonized electric system, you're going to have batteries deployed in many orders of magnitude beyond where we are now. Y'all, notice how they're moving. They don't even want to consider nuclear as an option. Notice. They don't even want to talk about, and they're saying, well, the nuclear got taken off. Do you know why nuclear got taken offline? Well, everything else so overwhelmed the system. It tripped the nuclear system, but also valves and regulatory machines in the nuclear systems froze too, because the Texas Energy Commission never got into weatherizing. This was a once-in-a-lifetime winter storm in Texas. They didn't bother planning for it, it seems. Someone's got to be held accountable here. And here's the other part. While everyone is screaming over whether it was wind turbines or fossil fuels or low natural gas pressure, you notice what no one's talking about. The people who made the decisions not to winterize the mechanisms of power in Texas. Perhaps maybe instead of focusing on the windmills and the fossil fuels, we should focus on firing the people who didn't take the steps necessary to correct the decisions. Perhaps we should focus on firing people. The bureaucrats always get past. It's the systems that failed. Notice it's never the bureaucrats who failed. It's never their decisions. It's the systems. And the left, of course, hijacks the conversation to make it all about renewables. All right. Batteries. They want massive batteries. Essentially, because the wind sometimes overproduces and then stops, overproduces the wind turbine energy, they want giant batteries in which you store the energy so that it can then be put into the power system when the wind stops blowing. In theory, makes sense. We're not there, as one of these people CEOs notes. What are the batteries made of? Lithium ion. Where do you get the lithium? Where do you get the lithium? Let's see. Let's Google here. Primary sources of lithium. Produced from a variety of natural sources. And oh, guess what? The world lithium supply. China. Yeah. See, there's a problem. There's a problem here. The United States has a massive lithium consumption, and a lot of that lithium is in Chile and in China. And do you know who's buying the mines in Chile? China. It seems like, it makes me wonder almost, is China behind this push? Is China behind some of the talking points that we would, essentially China is buying up the major rare earth mineral and precious mineral and chemical mineral compounds that are needed for the next generation so that we are all beholden to China. And then you have people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a socialist, somewhat sympathetic to China, who's out there saying, oh, well, Texas can't have fossil fuels and we got to get to renewables. No. There are bureaucratic problems and there are bureaucratic demands, and we need to fire a lot of bureaucrats who made a lot of decisions or chose not to make a lot of decisions. But what we also need to do is note that, yes, it turns out the initial reaction from a lot of us, myself included, that it was the wind turbines that caused the problem was overstated. It was actually the fossil fuels, the natural gas, the weak supply, the low pressure in the pipes for natural gas. That was predominant. But also the wind turbines and the solar panels did contribute to it. And we should note how the media has gone into damage control for the renewable energy industry and has chosen to paint a counter narrative, not actually tell the complete story, that there were multiple failure points, including the wind turbines, and it was the bureaucrats themselves who made the decisions not to weatherize all the stuff. It's the bureaucrats more than it is the machinery that needs to be held accountable here. They got the machinery in place. They've got a weather grid in place. They've got a power grid in place. The power grid was unusable because of failures. Those failures were caused by weather. The weather could have been predicted by the bureaucrats who could have taken preemptive steps to weatherize, and they chose not to. But it's way more valuable for the media to push an attack on conservatives that, oh, conservatives are lying about the trouble. It wasn't our beloved windmills. No, actually, it was your windmills too. They just weren't a significant portion of the problem. But yes, they too failed. Let's not pretend they didn't fail. You would never know, reading the New York Times coverage of this, listening to CNN and MSNBC's coverage of this, you would never know that the wind turbines actually did fail. They've gone into such forceful pushback against conservatives pointing out the failures of the wind turbines, they're ignoring the fact that they did fail. Was it the most significant portion? No. Did it contribute? Yes. When the media gets so much more interested in telling a story instead of telling the truth, there's a reason people don't believe them anymore. In Texas, the energy grid failed. The fossil fuel systems weren't weatherized. They froze. The coal couldn't even make it into the conveyor belts because the coal stack itself froze. The wind turbines, though, they froze too because they weren't winterized. The solar panels, they were covered over in snow. They couldn't generate power. So let's paint a truthful picture and not just try to advance the Green New Deal by screaming about what conservatives said instead of actually telling the truth, media. This is why people don't believe you guys.
You can follow Erick around social media at EW Erickson.
Hello there. There's a friend of mine sends me a point that is fair and true. One of the problems with our domestic energy grid, and in particular in a place like Texas that is so completely deregulated, is that wind energy and solar energy are so cheap right now because they're subsidized by the federal government. So no other source of power can compete with it on typical days. So no one builds baseload energy. No one in Texas is building more gas, more nuclear power. And then all of a sudden it's too late. You have a situation like this. The federal government has so subsidized wind and solar that in a market that is fully deregulated, there's no financial incentive for any power company to want to build the baseload energy that you can flip a switch and turn on. nor is there money to upgrade those systems, for example, to weatherize them, which is part of the problem here. That this is a very fair point. It's a friend of mine who's in the energy industry and knows this stuff. That you've got to, like, for example, in Georgia Power has built nuclear power here, even at great cost, even as it's going to raise rates, even as environmentalists have attacked it and others have attacked it. But the fact is that it will be able to be turned on and will generate baseload energy for when the wind doesn't blow, when the sun doesn't shine, when the batteries aren't available, and when you have a massive ice storm. And by the way, they're weatherizing. When you make, through subsidy, wind and solar super cheap, people have a hard time making the case for building your baseload power, but you still need fossil fuels. We're not at a point to be able to flip a switch on a battery and take the reserves from wind or solar to feed out to people. And really, our energy solutions need to be all or nothing. And in Texas, they're going to have to find a way to incentivize building more fossil fuel plants, frankly, or nuclear. They're going to have to do that. They're going to have to weatherize their systems. They're going to have to justify the costs for weatherization. And someone at the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, that's in charge of it, needs to be fired, needs to lose their job. It's unacceptable what happened, and it was entirely preventable. Now, let's go to the phones. Andrew, waiting very patiently. You're going to be up first today. Welcome.
Hey, Eric, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm a first-time caller, long-time listener. I just noticed, I'm not actually in Georgia, but I noticed that in the Georgia Senate subcommittee today, a new restriction on absentee voting just passed. And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little.
Yeah. So yes, they want to essentially, you're going to have a doctor's note unless you're over 75 or in the military. It's not going to pass. The lieutenant governor is opposed and the speaker is opposed. And I suspect even the governor would veto it, in large part because if you did this and required a doctor's note to vote early, you would lose the Republicans in Cherokee County and Forsyth County who overwhelmingly vote absentee. One reason we went to full absentee voting is because the Republicans in Cherokee and Forsyth weren't showing up on election day. And so we're going to have to find a way. I think tying absentee ballots to photo ID is the way to go, because then you deal with the fraud issue without shutting off those Republican voters. I got a hard break here. I got to let you go there. I'm going to spend more time on this issue in the next hour because it's going to become a controversy. I guarantee it. But we got to talk about Stasi Karen when we come back. Why, hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. All right, I have mentioned to you Clubhouse before. Hang on a second. Let's see this. I dare I do this? Let's see. Yes. In Clubhouse, right? Yes, there are conversations. I'm not gonna randomly just fire them up because who knows what they may utter bad words, and I would get in trouble or get my affiliates in trouble if you heard a bad word come across. So I won't do it. But Clubhouse is an app. It's invite only. I got an invite, and in Clubhouse, you can connect with other people, and you can have a conversation. You can have a conversation. Clubhouse essentially is now for video, what other apps have done for video and stuff, Clubhouse does for audio. You would think you have a phone app and you can call a party line. Well, Clubhouse is basically a party line. And you can go into this app and you can see, let's see, there are upcoming events, according to me. Oh, look, today at 7 p.m., Improving Macon. It's a Clubhouse app, and you're going to have Lester Miller, the mayor of Macon's going to be in there, Seth Clark, new councilman there, county commissioner, Virgil Watkins, and others. How to improve Macon. They're going to do it on Clubhouse. So they're going to exclude pretty much everyone in Macon, Georgia, from being able to participate in the conversation by having it on Clubhouse. Clubhouse, it's like Twitter, but for voice, except you go into rooms and you have conversations in rooms like a party line that everybody can call into, and people can be moderated. You can raise your hand. You can say you want to speak. They can allow you in. And essentially, you get to hang out and listen to the cool kids. The other day, Mark Zuckerberg was on there talking. Elon Musk gets on there. I'm fairly certain that some of the celebrities who are on there have to be paid to make it cool and hip. They get people on there. I think I saw Vera Wang on there at some point. I'm pretty sure that they're paying people to make it cool to go to the Clubhouse. And it's all audio. There's no text. It's all listening in on conversations. You're eavesdropping on the cool kids. Maybe they'll allow you. Well, this has upset the New York Times. In particular, it has upset Taylor Lawrence. Taylor Lawrence is, let's see, if the East German Stasi had a House Karen, if they had like an office of the Department of Karens, Taylor Lawrence would be Chief Karen. She would be head Karen, head of the commissar in charge of the Karens. She is a trust fund child of white privilege who has openly talked about ordering $20 avocado toast on apps to have it home delivered. Yes, this is a person, Taylor Lawrence, is a Karen of white trust fund privilege who openly tweets about ordering $20 avocado toast for home delivery using apps. That's really all you need to know about her, except you also need to know that she covers culture and technology and she despises all of it. And part of this is, there's the stereotype from the 80s and 90s where the kid who was in charge of the high school newspaper and couldn't get a date to prom essentially would turn the entire school newspaper against the institution of the prom and try to burn it all down. Taylor Lawrence is like that. She is a trust fund person of social ineptitude, I'm sure, who buys $20 avocado toast online and then complains about the delivery service. And she hates technology. She can't be in technology. I don't think she's smart enough to be in technology, but she got a lot of money, family money, and she wound up at the New York Times, and her entire mission in life is to make other people miserable. Her entire mission in life is to use the New York Times as her personal weapon to bully people she doesn't like. So Taylor Lawrence, I got to read you the tweet because the tweet is incredible. This is the actual tweet from the New York Times about a story they're doing on this Clubhouse app. Unfettered conversations are taking place on Clubhouse, an invitation-only app that lets people gather in audio chat rooms. The platform has exploded in popularity despite grappling with concerns over harassment, misinformation, and privacy. Unfettered conversations. How dare these tech billionaires be allowed to have conversations without Taylor Lawrence being able to Karen them? In fact, Mark Andreessen, one of the venture capitalist people of America, was on there, and she accused him of using the R word. For those of you wondering what the R word is, am I allowed to say retard on air now because will I get canceled? That's the R word. A lot of people, I mean, I've had this reaction from people when I mentioned that she was acting for using the R word. What is the R word? It's the other word you can't use. And she attacked him but he didn't. So so for example, and this comes into play with the Wall Street Bets people on Reddit. They at some point adopted the phrase during all the GameStop stuff that we can stay retarded longer than they can stay solvent. And they were referring to themselves as that. And Mark Andreessen was pointing out this is how they refer to themselves. He used the R word. He used the R word. Teacher, teacher, teacher. I can't use my East German accent. I suspect that Taylor Lawrence uses an East German accent and has now written this piece. Robert Van Winkle, who is better known as the rapper Vanilla Ice. I wonder if he's kin to Pappy. I wonder if he's kin to Pappy Van Winkle. I have no idea. Robert Van Winkle, who is better known as the rapper Vanilla Ice, held court online last week with more than 1,000 fans. In a rambling conversation, Mr. Van Winkle praised the poses of the 90s band Belle Biv DeVoe and demurred when asked about his relationship with Madonna. He dispensed advice on real estate and life, saying, you got to protect your happiness to protect your life. At one point, an attendee serenaded the gathering with an a cappella version of his hit Ice Ice Baby. Several hours later, Mr. Van Winkle confessed that he needed to leave before the mother of his child got angry. It was the kind of freewheeling and unpredictable event that has been happening around the clock on Clubhouse, an 11-month-old social media app that has exploded in popularity with the tastemakers of tech and popular culture, and that is quickly becoming a town square for debates over free speech and politics. This kind of gives away the lie here, doesn't it? The tastemakers of tech and popular culture, and she's not really one of the cool kids. She's not one of the tastemakers, therefore she hates it all. The app, which lets people gather in audio chat rooms to discuss different topics, has been downloaded nearly 4 million times in the last month alone, according to Apptopia. Public figures as various as Elon Musk, Lindsay Lohan, and Roger Stone have joined it. I don't know who is. I got nothing. And the unconstrained conversations this enables have incurred the wrath of China. So here's the funny part of it. So Clubhouse, this app, has incurred the wrath of China, but also of the New York Times for the same reason. People can have unfettered conversations. Can you just this Lawrence person? Can you, if she was in charge of the Clubhouse? You can't come in. You're not wearing comfortable shoes. Oh, wait. Who is this? Oh, my assistant is texting me. And, she's listening. This is, the secret to my marriage is that my wife doesn't listen. And I feel like my assistant and I, she listens. Is this going to disrupt our relationship? Is that really it? A-I, wee-wee, this is someone's name? is a Chinese contemporary artist and activist from China. Really, as an activist, he's been openly critical of the Chinese government. Oh, so he's on here, and the wrath of China has come down, and the wrath of Taylor Lawrence. Clubhouse has generated debate over whether audio is the next wave of social media. In thousands of chat rooms every day, Clubhouse's users have conducted unfettered conversations on subjects as varied as astrophysics, geopolitics, queer representation in Bollywood, and even cosmic poetry. Queer representation in Bollywood? This is a major change in how the social internet works, says Dave Morin, who founded the social network Path more than a decade ago and has invested in Clubhouse. I believe it's a new chapter in queer representation in Bollywood. Clubhouse's trajectory has been rapid. It had just a few thousand users in May, even though the app is invitation only and not widely available. The invitations are so coveted, they've listed on eBay for $89. And, you know, if I understand right, they tried to get her out and she got an invite and came back in so that she can be the school marm Stasi informant in the New York Times. This month, German and Italian regulators publicly questioned whether Clubhouse's data practices complied with European data protection. China blocked the app after political conversations popped up on it outside the country's tight internet controls. Okay. What does it tell you that a New York Times reporter who orders $20 avocado toast and blasts the delivery service is as upset about Clubhouse as China is? Because people may be able to have fun without her and have conversations without her. What does that say? That this is, I mean, whatever happened to a free press? Now it seems that the press believes its freedom is to be used to silence those that it disagrees with. Taylor Lawrence would be Stasi Karen. And there are a lot of other Stasi Karens in the department of Karen in the Stasi network that want to shut down anyone who dares to say anything they don't like. There was a report the other day, I wish I had the link, somebody sent it to me. Reporters openly fretting that how can we fact check private conversations and DMs? That's right. They want to be able to find a way to have access to direct messages because someone may be spreading disinformation in Twitter direct message group chats. I've got a group of friends that I have a group chat with on Instagram. The only group of friends I have an Instagram group chat with. We talk about all sorts of stuff. The idea that we would let Stasi Karen want to fact check conversation with friends. And I got to imagine, does this person not have friends? Because apparently every time there's a group of friends together who just want to talk, Stasi Karen believes she needs to fact check them online or off. What a deeply unhappy person. This is new technology. New technology gives rise to problems like old technology. Problems eventually get sorted out. But one of the new problems that we've got in society is that the media no longer knows its place in society. The media has decided it is no longer about giving us the truth of what happened, but one, presenting a narrative that leaves out facts contrary to the narrative. Two, enforcing the narrative with near religious dogma. And then three, punishing anyone who contradicts the narrative. That's all this is in the media. The New York Times in particular is routinely now doing this. They no longer want to tell you the truth. They want to tell you the prevailing progressive narrative and attack anyone who dares to push back on it. And if you can have a private message with friends behind the scenes, unseen on Telegram or direct messages on Twitter or Instagram, well, we got to stamp that out. We got to stamp that out because that would be bad. You might actually be free thinkers on Instagram and having conversations, and God help them and God help you. And this is not stable for their. And you know what this actually does? Stasi Karen actually undermines the value of the New York Times to its readers, although so many of them are progressive, they don't care or they don't realize it at this point. But at some point, if the only way to cover the story is to be unhappy that people may have a conversation you're not a part of or can't fact check, people are going to start tuning you out. We actually do need a free press in this country. We actually do. Stable liberal democracies need a free press. But when the free press takes it upon itself to silence dissent, that's not a free press. That's no different than what China has. And these people flirt with China so much and Chinese authoritarianism, it's really striking that the New York Times technology reporter has as big a problem with an American app as China does, because God forbid someone may get on there and say something they don't like or they think is not true. But the New York Times is also one of these papers that is pushing the story. The wind turbines in Texas had no role to play in the energy crisis in Texas, when in fact they did, just not the predominant role. But if you read the New York Times and other coverage about what's happening in Texas, you would never know that. In fact, yes, the solar panels and the wind turbines, they failed too. It's just they were only 20% of the power grid, so their failures alone didn't contribute to the problem. The narrative for these people is way more important than telling the truth, and that's why so many people are going elsewhere to actually get the truth.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick Erickson.
Hello there. Well, here's the funny story for you where the law of unintended consequences plays a factor. This is from Augusta, Georgia. March will mark 6 months since any and all evictions were blocked by the federal government due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Here at home, the ban has protected hundreds of families in Augusta from becoming homeless. However, that bandage is leading to another problem, a lack of any available and affordable housing. This is WAGT in Augusta, Liz Owens. We found the cost of rent is skyrocketing across the city. Data from Zillow and Apartment List shows rents increasing by nearly 10% last year, making even more difficult for struggling families to find an affordable place to live in Augusta. A series of losses left Vantoria McNair moving in with a friend last year. She lost a family member and her only source of childcare over the summer. Next, she lost her job and her home to a fire. I've got 6 kids. She has 3. It's only a 2-bedroom. Space is tight. Money is tight. They ask me all the time, Mom, when are we going to move? And I say, we're going to move as soon as I find something. But after months of searching, she still found nothing. Seriously, I've called over 100. Nothing. There's nothing she can afford on a Section 8 voucher. Most say they don't accept Section 8, and the ones that do don't have any available because of the eviction law that's in place. In Richmond County, we found evictions dropped by more than 50% from this January compared to the year before. The moratorium on evictions makes it illegal for landlords to evict tenants for non-payment of rent if the tenant lost wages during the pandemic. But there's something else happening that's not getting coverage here. Landlords going bankrupt. While we're focusing on the plight of the poor during the pandemic, there are a lot of middle-class people who have invested, and they are middle-class people, and they've invested in rental properties as supplemental income. And they are renting to people. They themselves have mortgages they have to pay. They haven't lost their jobs, so they don't qualify for mortgage forbearance. But their tenants have lost their jobs, and they don't have to pay rent, and they can't get evicted. We're having spillover effects now with this. And there are more and more stories of landlords themselves going bankrupt because they can't make mortgage payments, because they have no revenue coming in, because the federal government won't let them evict people who've lost their jobs, and those people aren't paying their rent. And it's a complicated situation. Listen, the poor person who's lost their job because of COVID is not the bad guy here. They can't pay their rent. But the landlord isn't the bad guy either. If anything, the bad guy here is a federal government that won't just let this sort out. And in Georgia, frankly, we've got enough now jobs back and the economy reopened that some people just don't want to take a job because they're getting more money from the federal government to stay unemployed. So you're getting more money from the federal government to stay unemployed than you got by working, and you don't have to pay your rent, and so your landlord is going to go bankrupt. This isn't a sustainable good situation, and this is going to cause economic calamity down the road. You can see it. It is predictable this is going to happen. If inflation starts rising and interest rates go up, we're going to have economic calamity in this country. It is predictable, and the Democrats are going to own it. They'll try to blame Trump, but a lot of it is Democratic policies that are being put into effect right now. They need to be thinking about this. My buddy Jonathan Last, he writes at the Bulwark. Yeah, I know, it's the Bulwark. I love Jonathan Last, and he points out that, if inflation starts going up, you're going to see Donald Trump or someone like him come back and get elected. Now, Jonathan doesn't like Trump and doesn't want that to happen.
15.
He's right, though. And the fact that he can see it happening is something the Democrats and the Republicans all need to pay attention to. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show across the state of Georgia. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. In the last hour, Andrew called about a proposal in the state Senate that has made it out of committee. And it would restrict absentee ballots in the state of Georgia. And I want to spend just a moment here on that story. I need to bring you up to speed on what it is. Here, this is from the AJC. Bills requiring an excuse and an ID number for absentee voting in Georgia cleared their first committees Wednesday, creating new restrictions. A Senate subcommittee voted 3-2 along party lines to approve the bills, which now advance to the full ethics committee. Georgia law has allowed any registered voter to cast an absentee ballot since 2005. Senate Bill 71 would limit absentee voting to people who are over 75, have a physical disability, or are out of town. Democrats said the bill would stop people from voting from home if they're worried about their health, especially during the pandemic. COVID isn't choosy, said Sally Harrell, a Democrat from Atlanta. We're all vulnerable. The bill's sponsor, Jeff Mullis of Chickamauga, said voters should have to provide a reason to vote outside a polling place, as they had to before the Republican-controlled General Assembly made it available to everyone 16 years ago. I have gone to the way it used to be that worked very judiciously and that people were very confident of. I wouldn't call it going backward. I'd call it going back to a more manageable, more respectable form of voting. 34 states, including Georgia, allow any qualified voter to vote absentee without having to provide an excuse. The second bill passed by the subcommittee would require voters to submit a photocopy of their ID, a driver's license number, or other state ID number when requesting an absentee ballot. Voters are already required to submit a driver's license number when requesting an absentee ballot online, but there's no ID requirement for paper absentee ballot applications. In-person voters have to show photo ID. Larry Walker, Republican from Perry, is pushing this one. The purpose of this proposal is not to make it hard to cast a legal ballot, but to make it harder to cast an illegal ballot. Opponents come from the Democratic Party who say mailing personal ID documents would create opportunities for identity theft. Chris Bruce of the ACLU testified that both bills would create obstacles in voting. In addition to more bills passed separately, one would create a chief elections assistance officer within the state secretary of state's office responsible for intervening in low-performing county election offices. Another would limit the use of mobile voting buses to emergencies. The bill came after Fulton County deployed mobile voting buses across the county during the early voting period, allowing people to cast ballots inside the buses on the state's voting machines. All four advanced to the Senate Ethics Committee. All right. Let's break this down for you. The absentee balloting restrictions by Jeff Mullis are probably dead on arrival. The Speaker of the House has said it will not get through the House. So this just provokes a fight between the Senate and the House. And the Speaker, y'all know my feelings on the Speaker. I am not a fan, but his concerns are legit if we go back to the way we did, which, by the way, I favor. Just so you know where I'm coming from here, I'm trying to be fair here. I favor restricting absentee ballots. I favor Jeff Mullis's legislation. But me favoring it, also, I've got to be realistic about it. And as I attack others for telling you narrative and not truth, I got to tell you the truth as well. Even though I favor it, the Speaker of the House has a legitimate objection to it, as does Jeff Duncan, the Lieutenant Governor. The objections are that Republican voters in North Georgia in particular, which is the base of the Republican Party, while they may say they like these restrictions, historically do not turn up to vote on Election Day in the numbers needed to win. They have to have absentee voting. Those are white-collar workers in Cherokee County and Forsyth counties north of Atlanta that are often have unpredictable work schedules, maybe don't want to stand in line all day to go vote, so they vote absentee, they vote early. And they don't want an excuse. They just want to do it. And their thinking, whether you agree with them or not, is that if you were to preclude people from no excuse absentee voting, you would actually be hurting the GOP overall because you would suppress the number of Republicans who vote. They would be sabotaging themselves. What I think is probably the compromise here is that you're going to need to require people to put a driver's license number on their absentee ballot request. And that will require a third envelope so that you will have the envelope in which the ballot is contained that has no markings, the envelope in which that is contained that you fill out your information on, including your driver's license number, and then a third envelope that all of that is contained so that no one can steal your ID. Right now, you can fill out the back of the outer envelope and stick it in the mail, and people can read the back of the envelope and see all your information. But you're not putting your social security number or driver's license number on it. So that's going to drive up the cost of absentee balloting because you're going to have a third envelope in order to ensure no one has identity theft. And I think that's the price to pay. Essentially, we don't want people sending photocopies of their driver's license in the mail. And the reason we don't want people sending photocopies of the driver's license in the mail is not everybody has a photocopier at home. And if you're making people go pay for a photocopy of their driver's license, you're essentially creating a poll tax, and a liberal judge is going to throw that out. But it doesn't cost you anything to write your driver's license number on your outer absentee ballot envelope. But we got to worry about identity theft. Now, I also agree that, and this one is bipartisan, HB 270 sets a deadline to request absentee ballots 10 days before Election Day. That's actually bipartisan, and the reason it's bipartisan is because Democrats also agree with Republicans that you are asking local officials to do too much. If you're that concerned about voting absentee, go on and get your absentee ballot in. If you Georgia law right now, just for perspective, for those of you who don't understand this, right now the law says that you can request an absentee ballot up until the Saturday before the election. If you request it on a Saturday before the election, you're an idiot if you think they're going to be able to mail it to you in time, because you put in your request on a Saturday, they mail it out, it gets to you maybe on a Monday, but possibly on Tuesday, and there's no way to get it back unless you drive it. So you might as well show up and vote that day. It's absurd to me that anyone would oppose this, and thankfully most of the Democrats favor this one as well. It is really an undue burden on local governments. But the other thing is, say what you will about the Democrats, they have mastered absentee balloting processes. The problem here, though, is that it overwhelms local resources, and elections in Georgia are locally based and locally operated, which is also why creating a chief elections assistance officer would be a good thing, to be able to coordinate between underperforming counties that are not handling their absentee ballot processes and requests the way they need to, and making sure they get beefed up resources. That's a good thing in my mind. It's a good thing. And I think that that measure has a better chance of passing, as does the photo ID obligation, than the one where the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor are both already opposed to it. Now, you can get something through the state Senate when the Lieutenant Governor is opposed to it, and I don't think he's going to fight it, but the Speaker of the House can just kill it. And I'm torn on this one, because as much as I genuinely think that we should restrict absentee balloting, and by the way, this is not a suppress the Democrats thing for me. For some people, let's admit, there are some people who think that they're fraud and abuse and the Democrats are gaming the system. Let's stop them. This is for me, it's a very hardcore principle of the Constitution says Election Day is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So we should all show up together and stand in line together and be miserable together. I favor making it a holiday. Everybody take off work. We all go stand in line together. We're miserable. We're rained on together, snowed on together, sweaty, smelly, whatever, and we go do this. We should have a civic obligation to do it. But I am in the minority on this, and I acknowledge I am in the minority on it, and it's not going to happen. It should, but it won't. And if that's the case, let's not restrict it, but let's require people put their photo ID on it. And if they put their photo ID on it, we'll be in a better position to regulate illegal votes. Because again, I don't think anyone has shown there has been enough fraud to overturn the election. But as a former elections lawyer, I can tell you there's always fraud in some capacity at the local level. It never impacts the president, but at the local level, it can impact a city council race. Typically, it's caught, but not always. Anything we can do to provide people a belief in the security of the process, in the integrity of the process, we should do it. We fundamentally should do it. And requiring people to hand over their driver's license number in order to vote by absentee ballot, when they got to show their driver's license in the polls, we should do that.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you'd like to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. What about Harold Melton, that is? I was told more than once by multiple people that when Johnny Isakson stepped down, the guy that everybody wanted to go to the Senate, the guy that everybody wanted to put there, was not Kelly Loeffler. It was Harold Melton, the Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court, a Republican, who is black, who is just wicked good. and that he did not want it. I've been told this by multiple people. I've never talked to Harold. I don't really know him. But multiple people have told me that he declined, and that's why the governor went the direction he did. He really wanted Harold Melton. And now Harold Melton is stepping down as Chief Justice. There is speculation that what if Harold Melton wants to run, and what if David Perdue did what he did to try to preempt a possible run by Harold Melton? David got back into the game. I don't know that David would do that. And two, I don't know that Harold Melton wants it. If it's true, as I believe it is, he was offered it and declined the last time, he probably wouldn't want it now. And from what I've heard from way too many people, is that Harold Melton is one of the nicest people on planet Earth, and there's no way he would want to run for office in that capacity. So I'm guessing it's not the case. But also, I am starting to be intrigued by the idea. Now, listen, I think David would be great. But I think Harold Melton is an intriguing choice people don't think about because he was seen as a nonpartisan Chief Justice, but he is a conservative Republican. Sonny Perdue put him on the bench. He would be an intriguing choice. But also, I got to say this. Here's what people keep talking about: Vernon Jones. And if Vernon Jones can run on a record, do it. The people who have talked, and this is not about Vernon Jones here. So if Vernon Jones is listening, don't be offended by me saying this, because I'm not saying about you. I'm saying about people who are advancing Vernon Jones. The people who are advancing the idea of Vernon Jones every time they approach me is, we need a black guy to campaign against a black guy. And what you're doing is you're judging Vernon Jones by the color of his skin, not his character, his issues, or anything else. And I'm opposed to that. If Vernon Jones, based on his character, positions, and the like, can run a competent, credible campaign, let him run. But if we're just saying, oh, we got to have a black guy, no, the hell you don't. You got to have a good guy. You got to have a good person, regardless of the color of their skin. You got to have a competent person. And same with the Harold Melton situation. Harold Melton, by all accounts, is a great guy, a conservative guy. And so if he can run as a good conservative guy with great policy, do it. Let's not just say, oh, black guy, we got to run. No, run a good person, regardless of their skin color. If it's David Perdue, let it be David Perdue. If it's somebody else, let it be that person. But let's not judge a person by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And that goes for everybody. That's what we need to do. Okay. I want to move on. We got other stuff. The governor of the state of Georgia is proposing updates to the citizens arrest law. This is Greg Bluestein in the AJC, maintaining momentum built last year with passage of hate crimes legislation. Governor Brian Kemp on Tuesday unveiled a proposal that would overhaul a Civil War era law that allows Georgians to arrest someone they suspect of committing a crime. Contrary to some press reports, he's not getting rid of the law, but they are updating it. It's been around for 160 years. The citizens arrest law came under scrutiny after the Ahmaud Arbery situation. It would allow employees at businesses, security officers, private investigators, and inspectors at truck scales detain someone they believe has committed a crime. The bill is being shepherded by Burt Reeves. It would allow off-duty police officers to make arrests when they're not in their jurisdiction. The bill would replace its 150-year-old statute with a version that includes protections for law enforcement and private businesses. It would address concerns from critics who say it's been abused to target black citizens. His intent is to repeal citizens' arrest and tailor the new law in a way that would eliminate legal loopholes that justify vigilantism. Now, here is one of the things the law will allow. It will allow the individuals to engage in citizens' arrest if they or their neighbor's home is being targeted for crime at the time. It would not allow someone to hear a rumor that someone committed a crime and then go try to round that person up. Current state law allows any Georgian who believes he's witnessed a crime or had immediate knowledge of the crime to arrest the suspected offender. If the crime is a felony and the person suspected of committing it is trying to flee, Georgians are allowed to arrest the person upon reasonable suspicion. In the governor's revisions, Georgians who detain someone they suspect of committing a crime would be required to either contact law enforcement holding the person or release them. We don't want vigilantes, and we don't want individual citizen bounty hunters who aren't licensed or trained. Supporters of the current version of the law say an overhaul is unwarranted. Opponents, most of them, want it gone altogether. Critics say the laws are easily abused, and they are. Now, here's the thing. The governor would, again, it'll allow people to detain anyone who they think is suspected of a crime, particularly at their property or a neighbor's property, but they got to call 911. They can't hold the person there all day. They can't execute the person. They can't take the law into their own hands. Also, for businesses, it gives them protection if they want to detain someone they think has committed a crime. I think this is a responsible overhaul. I think it's responsible, and he's getting buy-in from both sides. He's getting buy-in from Republicans and Democrats on this change. I think it's worth considering. You know, the Republicans right now, in particular, Democrats can be encouraged by this, I guess. The Republicans right now are looking for every sort of way to fight with each other. You got now the president of the United States coming out and attacking Brian Kemp again and attacking Mitch McConnell again. The Republicans the president seems like willfully intent on breaking up the Republican Party if he can't be in charge of it. Republicans or Democrats can take some courage from that. All right, I gotta stop, and I gotta tell you about Liam Thorpe, who none of you know. Liam Thorpe is a journalist in Great Britain. Great Britain is rolling out vaccines to people in high-risk groups now. They've moved beyond senior citizens to high-risk groups, and they are starting with people who have comorbidities that lead to higher risk of death. One of those comorbidities is high body mass index. So they're using people's driver's licenses that have their weight and their height, and they're reaching out to the people who may have high body mass indexes. So they reached out to Liam Thorpe. Liam Thorpe is in his 30s, young guy in great health and fairly skinny. And they told him that he could get the vaccine, and he was confused as to why the British government would tell him that because of his body mass index, he could get the vaccine. Liam Thorpe is 6 foot 2 inches and weighs less than 200 pounds. Well, it turns out that the British had him listed as being 6.2 centimeters high, basically a foot high, as opposed to 6 feet high, which meant he had a body mass index of about 28,000 on the British government scale. They've since corrected the error and told him, no, sir, we're sorry, you're not actually allowed to get the vaccine. You're not actually as fat as we thought you were. Hi there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Joe Biden had his town hall on CNN last night, and it was remarkable to see the fact checkers cover for him. You know, on more than one occasion when Donald Trump was president, the media would take him out of context to attack him, like the good people on both sides remark in Charlottesville. They would take him out of context, or the president claiming he was a first responder on 9/11, which he actually said he was not, but they took him out of context. Time and time again, the media fact checkers would do that. Well, listen to Joe Biden from last night.
Lie. And the biggest thing, though, as you remember, when you and I shouldn't say it that way, as you remember, but when you and I talked last, we talked about it's one thing to have the vaccine, which we didn't have when we came into office, but a vaccinator. How do you get the vaccine into someone's arm? So you need the paraffin, you need the needle, you need the mechanisms to be able to get it in. You have to have people who can inject it in people's arms.
That's been one of the problems, just getting enough people.
Yes, now we have made significant strides increasing the number.
Joe Biden just said in that clip that they didn't have the vaccine when he came into office. Not only did they have the vaccine, but they were ramping up the distribution of the vaccine. And you know what the fact checkers did? Oh, well, Joe Biden didn't actually mean that. Joe Biden has previously acknowledged the vaccine. Therefore, he couldn't have actually meant it. It was just, he was misspeaking. Isn't it great to see the fact checkers able to type with their mouth full and defend Joe Biden? It's really, really impressive skill set there that they have. But that's not all Joe Biden said. Listen to this one.
I talked about it. I said, look, you know, Chinese leaders, if you know anything about Chinese history, it has always been the time when China has been victimized by the outer world is when they haven't been unified at home. So the central, vastly overstated, the central principle of Xi Jinping is that there must be a united, tightly controlled China. And he uses his rationale for the things he does based on that. I point out to him, no American president can be sustained as a president if he doesn't reflect the values of the United States. And so the idea, I'm not going to speak out against what he's doing in Hong Kong, what he's doing with the Uyghurs in western mountains of China, and Taiwan trying to end the one China policy by making it forceful. I said, and by the he said he gets it. Culturally, there are different norms that each country and their leaders are expected to follow.
Culturally, there are different norms their leaders are expected to follow. So, if I'm following Joe Biden's logic, he's got to speak out because Americans expect him to speak out, but he gets what Xi Jinping is doing, and so, okay. There's a moral relativism in that statement that bothers me. Because it sounds like what Joe Biden is saying is I got to speak out because the American people expect me to speak out, but I'm not actually going to do anything about it because he's just got a cultural difference than us. The willfulness of the media and others to do that is it's a problem. It's a problem that progressives are praising China. There's a piece by Bruce Abramson in the Asia Times that I need to refer you to. Let me read you this. China envy runs strong among America's progressive elite. The Communist Party of China's hold on power and centralized decision-making has long appealed to progressives, infuriated with their inability to mandate solutions to global warming and other progressive priorities. Tom Friedman, an established bellwether of elite opinion, has been voicing this exasperation for more than a decade. Last weekend, he reduced the genocide in Xinjiang to, quote, bad stuff with the Uyghurs, of less concern than Chinese excellence in high-speed rail. Far too few Americans grasp the implication of such a view taking root among their own elite. Though more and more Americans are awakening to the challenges inherent in China's growing economic, technological, and military capabilities, few understand the threat that China's governing philosophy and structure pose to the United States. As David Goldman has explained, though the CPC is nominally communist, China is what has been for a millennia, an empire run by oligarchic mandarins. The appeal to an American elite that sees itself as a worthy meritocracy enamored of governance by bureaucratic experts is obvious. Americans need to understand that beyond mere appeal and envy, there is growing convergence of interests between China's entrenched communist oligarchs and America's emerging progressive oligarchs. Today's China, like all imperial powers, seeks to exploit the resources of anyone and anything outside its central oligarchy to enhance the prosperity, prestige, and power of that center. As a result, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't much care how foreigners organize their internal affairs, so long as they remain subject to two imperial edicts. Don't interfere with China's exploitation of your resources, and don't challenge the Communist Party's virtue and wisdom. Those rules frame Chinese influence in the U.S. As Lee Smith has recently outlined, China has employed another standard imperial trick to further its influence. It has invested heavily to create a formidable oligarchy of American enforcers. Though penetration is far deeper among Democrats than Republicans, this oligarchy is bipartisan. It also extends to leading American names in industry, banking, entertainment, and sports to create a tight alliance binding America's progressives to China. Those enforcers understand what they're paid to do. Unlike in earlier eras when food and gold were the focus of imperial exploitation, the most valuable resource today is information. China seeks to exploit American technical education, research, finance, and intellectual property. China's payment to those public resources flows almost entirely to elite progressives and their institutions. For Americans outside the elite, China offers low-cost consumer goods and technology products. Because the exploitation of information resources and the provision of inexpensive goods both reduce U.S. employment opportunities, American elite must stifle resentment that unemployed Americans express towards China. Potential critiques of the Chinese Communist Party run far beyond economic grievance, however. Numerous alleged actions are deeply offensive to traditional American sensibilities: destroying Tibetan culture, crushing freedom in Hong Kong, running genocidal concentration camps for the Uyghurs, brutalizing Falun Gong practitioners, suppressing Christianity, and using political prisoners for organ harvesting, to name but a few. The American oligarchy is paid to play down those atrocities as lamentable but of minimal consequence, as Tom Friedman's recent comments demonstrate. The imperative has never been more important than in discussion about the origins of the coronavirus that caused COVID-19. Unlike China's domestic human rights abuses, this pandemic has had a clear negative impact on Americans. Hence the absolute need to insist that the pandemic's origins remain unknown and to label it racist to refer to it as the Chinese virus. It is increasingly obvious that American progressive elite are perfectly willing to collaborate with China, are perfectly willing to devalue the United States because they view China's rise as inevitable anyway. It's one of the things that has frustrated me for so long, even about a lot of Republican leaders, is they all have kind of had this view that it's going to be dominant anyway. Its rise is inevitable. It's going to be an economic juggernaut. We're going to be number two. There was a show on, what was it, the CW, the WB, whatever, and it was a show about a kid. It's like Jack and Bobby or something nonsensical, where kid grows up to be president of the United States, and he was influenced by his brother who died, and there was this whole sub-thread of it that China was now the world's leader, and the president of the United States had to essentially go bow to China. It was baked into the thinking of it is still baked into the thinking of Hollywood elite and a lot of others that China is just going to become dominant. Well, China is only going to become dominant if we accept that and we don't come up with a strategy to subvert their rise by leveraging our freedoms and our abilities against them. But a lot of elite in this country don't want to even bother because they'll turn out okay. It's the rest of us who will have a problem. Do you think a guy on the radio who talks bad about China has a future in a country where the Chinese are number one and we have to bow to them? No. Do you think you've got a good future in the United States if you're a Christian and embrace the idea of Christian liberty with a Chinese state that's so dominant against you? You're not going to end up well either. It's the Tom Friedmans of the world who have been engaged in performing the leg company of China for decades that are going to be fine. It's the Jeff Bezoses of the world who's still going to make a lot of money, who's going to be fine. He's got no real moral capacity anyway. He's a fairly amoral guy. It's you and me who believe in freedom and liberty who are going to have problems. Let's plot this out for you. Increasingly, American businesses are enamored of the Chinese population and their ability to generate money for them. So the NBA plays games in China, makes $1 billion, and therefore can't speak out on the abuses in Hong Kong or what's happening with the Uyghurs. The American film industry wants Chinese box office revenue. This is an important point you need to pay attention to. As the American film industry increasingly turns to China for its box office revenue, well, let's do the tie-ins. Disney needs access to China for Disney movies to make money. Disney controls ESPN and ABC News. ESPN has already started turning its cameras away from Hong Kong protesters who've shown up at NBA games. How long before ABC News stops covering things that are going on in China? In fact, ABC News already downplays things that are going on in China. If they didn't, do you think Disney would have access to the Chinese box office? CNN has actually been fairly open about what's happening in China, but doesn't cover it particularly frequently. How much longer can it even do that when CNN is owned by AT&T, which also owns Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers needs access to the Chinese box office? Comcast owns NBC and MSNBC. It also owns Universal Pictures, which needs access to the Chinese box office. How long can NBC News tell you the truth about what's happening in China before China says, yeah, you're not going to have access to the box office if you cover China? CBS has CBS News and Paramount has Top Gun, and we've already seen them get rid of the Taiwan badges on Maverick's uniform or jacket so as to not offend the Chinese, so that Paramount can get Top Gun shown in the Chinese box office for revenue. So if Paramount is willing to change up iconic imagery of a character to not offend the Chinese, how long will CBS News, also owned by the same company, be able to cover China honestly before it starts being hit at the box office because Paramount gets blocked? Ironically, about the only news network now that can cover China without worry about its box office revenue is Fox, because Fox sold its movie business to Disney. But Fox also has ties. The Murdoch family has interests that could be undermined by China. The American news industry as a whole tends to be compromised by China because of their ties to the box office. Then there's the New York Times, which has no ties to the box office, but regularly puts people in the paper who are sympathetic to the Chinese. You've got Taylor Lawrence, who is a Stasi Karen, who is as concerned about the app Clubhouse as the Chinese are, because people could actually have free-form wheeling conversations in there that she can't regulate as a school marm hall monitor. And Tom Friedman, who has been performatively leg humping the Chinese for years. I was actually on a train ride one time with that guy, and I forget exactly, it's been so long ago, but I'll never forget, I was sitting diagonally from him, and the steward of the train needed to collect his objects, his trash, because we were coming into Washington from New York. We were on the Acela Express, and yes, I was in first class. And Friedman unloaded on the poor guy that this would never happen in China or some such. It was a ridiculous thing that he did. It really was ridiculous, and it was so predictable that he would huff and puff about how in China, on the high-speed rail system, this sort of treatment would never occur. And all the guy wanted was to pick up Friedman's trash because we were coming into D.C. It's harder and harder to be able to trust the media to report accurately on China. And as they increase their financial ties into China, it's going to be even harder. And American elite opinion on the left and the right increasingly thinks Chinese power is inevitable. And so why fight it? I think we have to fight it because there's really no guarantee it's inevitable. And we should be doing everything possible we can to stop China's rise as a dominant global power, because what's good for China is bad for the entire rest of the world. It really is that simple.
There's not my truth or your truth. There is only...
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you'd like to be on the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Let's go to the phones. Bruce, you're going to be next. Welcome.
Hey, how are you, Eric? It's
Good.
nice to speak with you today.
Thank you.
I agree with you wholeheartedly when you say it is up to us as to whether or not, what I like to say is the 20th century we all refer to as the American century. And I think it's up to us as to whether or not the 21st century is another American century or a Chinese century. But what I think you're missing is that's what the Trans-Pacific Partnership was about. That's what TPP was about. It was about an effort to create an economic counterweight to China's rise. And I think if you're going to talk about this, you need to talk about how boneheaded it was for Trump to withdraw from that treaty or that trade agreement.
I actually at the time said that. I just hadn't thought about the
Awesome.
Trans-Pacific Partnership in a long time, because you're right. We got to have a Trans-Pacific Partnership. The Australians and New Zealand are clamoring for us to get back into one, as is Singapore. And curiously enough, even Vietnam, which is recognizing the threat to China, wants to be a communist nation, wants to be in a free trade agreement with the United States to counterweight China. That should tell us all a lot.
Yeah. So and the other thing is that also, so we're not building this counterweight to China economically. We're hurting our own farmers because a cattle farmer in Kansas is at a disadvantage in this market compared to a cattle farmer in Canada because the Americans are facing higher tariffs. And I don't know. I know there's a lot of opposition to free trade and probably amongst your listenership, but I think it's something we should consider getting back into.
Yeah, listen, you and I actually don't disagree on this issue. I think there's actually, while the tariffs in some ways, I was actually surprised, did disrupt the Chinese economy more than ours. There's a lot of evidence. I think that we also have to enter in some of these free trade partnerships, again, with countries that want to serve as a counterweight to China. We can't take a go-it-alone approach with China, which is essentially the Trump administration didn't want alliances to go against China. They wanted to do it themselves. There's actually a report today that something like 70% of the British public now believes that China is the chief global threat. And that tells me that there's an opportunity for a international coalition against them. And it's going to require some trade deals. Like a lot of Republicans suddenly have decided they don't like. You're right on that.
Yeah.
And I just, again, I think
it doesn't have to be open hostility. It can be fierce, peaceful competition.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it can. One of the concerns that I've got as just a national security issue is that the Chinese are going into South American countries where there's a lot of precious metals and lithium things, like Chile is a great example. China actually owns or has a controlling interest now. I think American Enterprise Institute pointed this out, owns or has a controlling interest in 70% of lithium production in Chile right now, which is absurd. And then in Sri Lanka, they entered into a bond deal with the Sri Lankan government and structured it in such a way that when the Sri Lankan economy collapsed, they had to give a port to China, which China is now putting, turning into a naval base. And they're using their money in ways we used to use our money.
Yeah, you may know this. I forget the technologies, but they looked and they said, what are the big technologies of the 21st century? Renewables, or as you're saying, like batteries. And they said, we're going whole hog on this.
Yeah.
We're going to do whatever we can to dominate these. And we don't think like that as much as we used to.
Yeah, we don't. Look, I got to let you go there because we're out of time. But yes, you and I, we do in large part agree on this. I actually thought TPP. I mean, y'all, just for perspective on this, the communists of Vietnam won a free trade deal with the United States to block China. When the communists of Vietnam are worried about the communists of China, there's a problem with China, and the Western world actually can probably find some alliances in some unique places, particularly because of how China is getting countries into debt and then calling loans that they can't pay. We need to be thinking about this. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number you want to be on the show is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I have a listener who asked when I was coming to Reynolds over on Lake Oconee, who listens over there on our affiliate. And I intend to get over there as soon as I can, and we'll let all of you know. I have a listener who works, they actually have a couple listeners over there. One has a house, another works at a restaurant, and I'm going to get over there as soon as I can. I'm ready to go. I wanted to take the family. You know how hard it is? They got cabins over at the Ritz at Reynolds. And you get a 2-bedroom. They're super expensive, though. My goodness gracious. But they're also never available. And I was just thinking, with spring break coming up, we normally go to Hilton Head, and I forgot to book the house. And now somebody else has the house that I always book. And I probably couldn't afford it anyway. But I could go over there for a few days. I'll probably go up to North Georgia somewhere. May go up to Lake Burton or to Barnsley Gardens. Maybe even to Callaway. Who needs the Ritz? Even if I want to go. Nonetheless, I'll be there. I intend to make a grand tour of my affiliates as soon as I get the second round of the vaccine. My wife, by the way, got the second round, and everybody told us that it's fairly common for people to have a reaction to the second round of the vaccine, the Moderna one in particular, and she has had a reaction where she'll be fine, way better than getting the virus, but nonetheless, it happens. Not everybody does. Not everybody has a reaction, but it's apparently fairly common. And now, I know I got to get up. I'm going fly fishing up near Clarksville. I think the first weekend in March. I may have to go hang out up there. In any event, I'm moving on. We have real news. I want to read for you a book review of Bill Gates's book. Now, Bill Gates has come out. I think he's been a little bit mischaracterized on he wants everybody to go 100% synthetic beef, and I think his point was actually that we should incorporate 100% synthetic beef into our diet, not that people should go. There's a point. So there's synthetic beef that has beef hemoglobin in it, and there is 100% synthetic beef that is purely like chemical and vegetable base. And Bill Gates is being misinterpreted as he wants us to go 100% synthetic beef. And no, what he wants us to do is to incorporate 100% synthetic beef into our diet that also includes beef, if that makes sense. To not go with the synthetic, we can eat cow, but also eat fake cow without having to eat fake cow that has some real cow in it, if that makes any sense to you at all. The reporter who interviewed him said he's being mischaracterized. He doesn't want to give up beef. He just wants us to incorporate into our diet pretend beef that is 100% pretend. In any event, Bill McKibben is a writer who, let me just so you have a sense of this guy, he's the author of Falter. How has the human game begun to play itself out? And also, he writes the Climate Crisis newsletter for the New Yorker. So this guy is an enviro nut who is fully into the religious cult of climate change. And he's writing a review of Bill Gates's book. Bill Gates has a new book out, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, the solutions we have and the breakthroughs we need. Now, one of the things I notice about these sorts of people, there is a sort of person out there who considers themselves an expert on a subject matter. And when someone who's not an expert on that subject matter is not really engaged, starts studying and wants to beef up and care about the issue, the reaction from this sort of person is not welcome, I'll help you get up to speed. It's, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You should just shut up and listen to the rest of us. And there's a lot of that out there. And this is what it strikes me here. Let me just read you part of this book review, because there are some points that need to be made. First things first, Much respect to Bill Gates for his membership in the select club of ultra-billionaires not actively attempting to flee Earth and colonize Mars. His affection for his home planet and the people on it shines through clearly in this new book, as does his proud and usually endearing geekiness. The book's illustrations include photos of him inspecting industrial facilities like a fertilizer distribution plant in Tanzania. Definitively, the happiest picture is of him and his son grinning identical grins outside an Icelandic geothermal power station. Quote, Rory and I used to visit power plants for fun just to learn how they worked, he writes as the caption. But this new volume could not be more timely. It emerges after a year that saw the costliest slew of weather disasters in history, and that despite a cooling La Nina current in the Pacific, managed to set the mark for record global temperature. As everyone can attest who watched the blazes of Australia and California or the hurricanes with odd Greek names crashing through the Gulf, we are in dire need of solutions to the greatest crisis our species has yet faced. That sets you up for this. It is a disappointment then to report that this book turns out to be a little underwhelming. Gates, who must have easy access to the greatest experts in the world can provide, is surprisingly behind the curve on the geeky parts, and he's worse at interpreting the deeper and more critical aspects of the global warming dilemma. Since he confesses that he completely missed the climate challenge until 2006, when he met with some scientists almost 2 decades after the problem emerged. Previously, quote, I had assumed there were various cyclical variations or other factors that would naturally prevent a true climate disaster. It's perhaps not surprising that he's still catching up, and yet his miscalculations are important because they're widely shared. Now, this is why I want to get here. Pay attention to me. This is critically important you understand this. Listen to this. Let's do the numbers first. Gates correctly understands the basic challenge, which is to get to zero as soon as we can. Humans, he writes, needs to stop adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, which is as useful a sentence as the English language admits. And he understands that the key to doing this is to electrify as many human activities as possible, from powering our computers to turning the wheels of our cars and buses to producing steel. But when it comes to generating that electricity, he worries that solar panels aren't becoming more efficient fast enough. But that's not really the target here. In fact, as the analyst Ramez Nam points out, the price of solar power has dropped astonishingly in the last decade, far outpacing even the most optimistic forecasts. The price drop is 50 to 100 years ahead of what the International Energy Agency was forecasting in 2010, mostly because we're getting better at building and installing. Every time we double the number of panels installed, the price drops another 30 to 40%, and there's plenty of runway left. These staggering numbers are why Gates' current-day snapshot of the green premiums you need to pay for clean energy don't mean as much as he thinks they do, especially since storage batteries are now dropping in price on a similar curve. It's clear that the imperative is to install as much solar and wind power as fast as humanly possible, and if we don't make huge progress in the next 10 years, scientists have made clear we can kiss our Paris targets goodbye. One wishes Gates had talked, for instance, with Stanford's Mark Jacobson, whose team has calculated how almost every country on Earth could go to 80% renewable energy by 2030. If he had, he might have understood more clearly that things that really interest him, advanced nuclear power, for instance, are more about mopping up. He absolutely is right that we should be investing in research across a wide range of technologies because we may need them down the line to help scrub the last increments of fossil fuel from the system. But the key work will be done over the next decade. As London's carbon tracking initiative explained earlier this year, building new sun and wind power facilities is already or soon will be cheaper even than operating existing coal-fired plants. So why aren't we moving faster than we are? That's because of politics. And on he goes. So here's my point in reading that excerpt to you. Turns out things are going better than the environmentalists would have you believe with solar and wind power and everything else. Yes, we need nuclear power, but yes, costs are actually coming down. Now, keep in mind, it's government subsidy, And as we're seeing in Texas, the government subsidy for renewable energies has kept them from upgrading and maintaining coal and natural gas, which in part played a role in the disaster we're seeing. It wasn't just that coal and natural gas, which is 80% of the Texas power grid, couldn't stand up to the cold. It's that there was no financial incentive to build more capacity and no financial incentive to weatherize, because all of the financial incentive is to go with wind and solar, and the wind and solar output pretty much was eviscerated by the cold. But costs are coming down dramatically, and we're reaching goals. So why the climate change hysteria? See, here's the thing. I have come to conclude that the greatest amount of hysteria from the climate change, global warming, religious zealots out there is not because they really believe it, but because they really want us to do things we otherwise probably wouldn't do. So if scientists told us we had 50 years before the world ended, maybe we wouldn't have rushed as fast as when they told us 10 years. So they don't really think the world will end in 10 years, but if they told us 50 years, they think we would drag our feet so long that we could be in a point of no return. But there's a problem here, because we're not going to meet the goals in 10 years, and we're not going to die. How many of the climate change predictions have gone wrong? How many of the climate change projections just didn't turn out to be right? There are a ton of them that aren't right. And they've been going on for a long time. A long, long time. And nobody wants to hold these people accountable for their bad projections and bad predictions. No one wants to hold these people accountable for all of their failures to predict where the world was going to go and how climate was going to be impacted. They simply don't want to do it. And the fact of the matter is that for a very long time, we've had these outrageous, hysterical predictions from the global warming crowd that now won't even say global warming. They say climate change. Because every time they would say global warming, we would have an ice storm and everyone could point out that they weren't serious. So they've had to change the issue. Essentially what we're dealing with here is a branding issue. We're not dealing with a fact-based issue anymore when it comes to the environmentalists. It's all about branding. We got to brand this as climate change and scare the crap out of people so they do stuff we want them to do. And then the government's got to subsidize so much that we can't keep the base load of power online. When they're trying to scare you that bad to get their way, it's more religious fervor than it is real. And they discredit themselves, by the way. Because when we get 10 years from now, and we haven't done all the stuff they've said we need to do, they're either going to suddenly claim that we've done it when we haven't, or they're going to say, oh, no, we've done enough. We've got another 10 years, 10 years more, and they keep moving it. I mean, what was it? In 2008, the Arctic was going to be completely melted. Prince Charles gave us, how many months before we all died? Going back to Al Gore years ago, that by 2015, the whole planet was going to be wiped out. We were all going to die. All of these hysterical concerns have never come to fruition. And they keep saying, well, we were wrong. It's going to happen, just not yet. We got to hurry. And then they hop on their private jet and they fly off somewhere else. It's hard to take these people seriously. And then you've got these doom and gloom scenarios essentially criticizing Bill Gates for coming their way and writing a book and then saying, oh, actually, things are way better than you thought when we're all going to die anyway. It's not really a selling message. Ultimately, the whole climate change, global warming issue at this point is a branding issue for a bunch of socialist communists who have decided to become environmentalists because the USSR is no longer there to prop them up anymore. So they had to embrace the environmentalist movement and get left-wing Americans to pay their costs when really they're anti-capitalist, anti-Western, anti-American, and their entire agenda is not about saving the planet but destroying the United States.
Honest news and conservative views.
Never separated from
I just quick note here. This song we're coming back to is Judah and the Lion. I am a big Judah and the Lion fan. I really like them, and Judah has a new album out. Judah XOXO. What is the? It's a worship album, and I've been listening to it, and man, it speaks to my soul. 7. Just find. I guess now it's just Judah. Spotify or Apple Music. You can find it. I don't know why Apple Music makes it so difficult to share albums on like Instagram and stuff. I guess they're now making it easier. And so I just shared it. And if you go on my stories on Instagram, you can see this. Judah and the Lion is a fantastic band. I was supposed to go see him in concert, and the virus messed everything up. And Judah and the Lion has this. It's called 7. And I gotta tell you, this whole album just ministers to me. And if you are at all, I'm not like super into just Christian music per se, but this album, y'all, it really has it hit at the perfect time for me, and the songs are just remarkable. And I'm a big fan of theirs to begin with, and a big fan of his, and I realize this isn't a music program, but still.
May we have power together as his children.
I would encourage you, if you're at all interested, get on Apple Music or Spotify and check out Judah. That's the album name is 7. It's the number 7. I'm a fan. I'm really glad he did that. Now, not what you typically get in your national talk show, but nonetheless. All right. So are any of you into Bitcoin? Are any of you into Bitcoin? I'm not really into Bitcoin. I have friends who are into Bitcoin. I've got a couple of friends who early on got Bitcoins, like whole Bitcoins, and they got a lot of money now. I'm not really into it. I don't invest in things I don't understand. I don't really understand Bitcoin. My libertarian blockchain friends try to explain it to me. I don't understand blockchain. I don't understand Bitcoin. Y'all can make money off of it. I'll go make money somewhere else. If this politics stuff doesn't work out, I'm going to profit on cultural decline. I'm going to go be a pot farmer in Colorado, and the rest of you can buy it and make me rich. And I will watch the world burn from a mountaintop in Colorado. And I want nothing, don't want anything to do with all the crazy out there, including that. But I'll be the farmer, and y'all can burn up the world and come quickly, Lord Jesus. There's some crazy going on out there. Well, the environmentalists, they're coming for you Bitcoiners now. Turns out, let me just read you this. This is it. I don't even know what this outlet is. It's some European publication. If you're reading this article, you're using electricity. The same goes for every Google search, email sent, and photo saved to the cloud. As our lives go digital, we need more electricity to power those lives. Yet there is one digital outlier that keeps getting a lot of attention: Bitcoin. For something that doesn't physically exist, Bitcoin really captivates the imagination and needs a lot of electric power to keep going. That's according to an ongoing study by the University of Cambridge's Bitcoin Electricity Consumption Index. They calculate that in 1 year, the machines behind the cryptocurrency require more power than the Netherlands, a country with over 17 million inhabitants. As the value of Bitcoin has skyrocketed recently to over $50,000 a coin, so has the need for electric power to run it. Bitcoin supporters say it's okay since it's created an entirely new financial system free of government interference.
30.
Mining gold and printing money, too, cost a lot to produce, transport, and keep safe. But Bitcoin now uses more energy than the Netherlands and Belgium put together. The environmentalists want you to stop mining Bitcoin. It's an algorithm, and you run machines and try to find new Bitcoins, and wow. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Y'all, this story bugs me. I wanted to deal with it earlier, and just we've had so much other stuff going on. This is Sheila Malger and Kate Sheehy at the New York Post. Fox News is pushing out this piece. A city public school principal, this is in New York City, is asking parents to reflect. Hush, not city, not Siri. Stop it. A New York City public school principal is asking parents to reflect on their whiteness, passing out literature that extols white traitors who dismantle institutions, education officials confirmed. The woke offensive at the East Side Community School in Manhattan features a ranking list titled The 8 White Identities, which ranges from white supremacist to white abolitionist. The curriculum, written by Barnard Hess, an associate professor of African American Studies at Northwestern University in Illinois, claims there is a regime of whiteness and there are action-based white identities. People who identify with whiteness are one of these, Hess writes above the 8-point list. It's about time we build an ethnography of whiteness, since white people have been the ones writing about and governing others. In between the two extreme identities of supremacist and abolitionist are such categories as white voyeurism, defined as wouldn't challenge a white supremacist, desires non-whiteness because it's interesting, and white privilege, or sympathetic to a set of issues but only privately, won't speak and act in solidarity publicly because benefiting through whiteness in public. Some people of color are in this category as well, helpfully adds. The handout was accompanied by a color-coordinated meter with the red zone on the left titled white supremacist and the green zone on the far right titled white abolitionist. A New York City Department of Education official told the Post that some parents at the school, which caters to 6th through 12th graders in the Lower East Side, first shared the material with staff. The principal then disseminated it to every parent as part of a series of materials meant for reflection and as food for thought. A Department of Education rep said in a statement, anti-racism and the celebration of diversity is at the core of our work on behalf of the young people of New York City. The document in question was shared with the school by parents as part of an ongoing anti-racist work in the school community and is one of the many resources the school utilizes. Northwestern University Associate Professor Barnard Hess presents an ethnography of whiteness in the ranking list. So here we go. Let me read you some of these. There is a regime of whiteness, and there are action-oriented white identities. People who identify with whiteness are one of these. It's about time we build an ethnography of whiteness, since white people have been the ones writing about and governing others. Number 1, white supremacist. Clearly marked a white society that preserves, names, and values white superiority. Number 2, white voyeurism. Wouldn't challenge a white supremacist, desires non-whiteness because it's interesting, pleasurable, seeks to control the consumption and appropriation of non-whiteness, fascination with culture. Example, consuming black culture without the burden of blackness. So the New York Times is right next to white supremacy is amazing. Number 3, white privilege may critique supremacy, but a deep investment in questions of fairness, equality, under the normalization of whiteness and the white rule, sworn goal of diversity. So the New York Times editorial page is white privilege. Number 4, white benefit. Sympathetic to a set of issues, but only privately. Won't speak or act in solidarity publicly because benefiting through whiteness is public. Some people of color are in this category as well. Number 5, white confessional. Some exposure of whiteness takes place, but as a way of being accountable to people of color after seeking validation from people of color. White critical, take on board critiques of whiteness and invest in exposing, marking the white regime, refuses to be complicit with the regime. Whiteness speaking back to whiteness. White traitor actively refuses complicity, names what's going on. Intention is to subvert white authority and tell the truth at whatever cost. Need them to dismantle institutions. And then white abolitionist, changing institutions, dismantling whiteness, and not allowing whiteness to reassert itself. I'm sorry. I got nothing. This is nuttiness. This is nuts. So the New York Times, I mean, this describes the New York Times consuming black culture without the burden of blackness. That's like 80% of the New York Times, which puts them right next to white supremacists or white privilege. Their sworn goal is diversity, so they can get their $20 avocado toast delivered by a minority person and feel good that they gave money to somebody who wasn't white. This is where, and you got a school system pushing this. Christopher Rufo of the Discovery Institute noted that it included a post in the curriculum, New Language of Public Education. The dissemination of Hess's literature to parents comes as the Department of Education and Schools Chancellor Richard Carranza have pushed to eliminate what they call current administrators' white supremacy culture. There's anti-bias training. Staffers are forced to attend slideshow presentations denouncing the current culture's paternalism and power hoarding while getting sued over creation of an environment that is hostile towards whites. Holy moly. The racial makeup of the student body is 55% Hispanic, 18 white, 15 black, 10 Asian, 2% others. The principal of the school made headlines in 2007 when he tried to prevent the arrest of a student accused of punching a school safety agent. The principal was arrested after scuffling with another safety agent during the fracas, but returned to school later that day. Y'all, there is a great madness among people these days. It's not enough that you can't see. Here's where I am. According to Scripture, there is neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek. And I try to govern myself by that you should not see people's race. You should move past it. But now there's this idea that we have to explicitly see it. We have to explicitly see it and change our behaviors, even though we ourselves have done nothing wrong. Somehow we're still doing stuff wrong because it's the system itself that's the problem and not us individually. But because we are white, we benefit from a system, and therefore the whole system must come down that benefits us in favor of what exactly? We can't elevate others so that they equally can partake in the system. No, there must be equity where we must take from ourselves and give to others. It's communism. It's Marxist in structure. Racism is bad. There are racists in the world, and we should fight against it. To tell a white person that they are racist because they benefited from a system where they busted their butt to get where they are, and now they've got to give it up, is not the way to have an honest conversation about any of this stuff. And I know it makes some people feel good to feel guilty, and it makes some people feel good to feel like they're playing a role by denouncing so-called privilege. You know what? It's not a privilege to have a two-parent heterosexual nuclear household that is the most stable form of raising a child. It's not a privilege. It's what all of society should have, but a bunch of people on the left have said it's not necessary and then decided to turn it on its head and say somehow you're privileged and advantaged by having what the rest of them have talked down, denounced, and discouraged others from having. You build up an entire government policy around devaluing mom and dad, particularly dad, and then you tell people you're privileged if you got a mom and a dad. No, you're not privileged if you have a mom and a dad. You were raised the way 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,000 years of human history have told everyone, shown everyone is the best way to raise a kid. Just because other people were irresponsible doesn't mean that you yourself are privileged. Just because other people have devalued two-parent heterosexual nuclear household. And by the way, do you know, and I say that explicitly because a two-parent heterosexual nuclear household, repeatedly sociological data shows, is actually the most stable way to raise a child. There is a lot of data that shows that a single dad actually is a fairly stable way to raise a child, and that a two-parent homosexual male couple is actually a fairly stabilizing way to raise a child. But there is a great deal of data to show that a two-parent heterosexual household is the most stable way to raise children. Not all children in those setups come out stable and advanced, but more often than not, if parents stay married, don't get divorced, you have a mom and a dad, your kid has a leg up on society. I mean, this is it. Pay attention here, and a lot of you won't want to hear this, but if you want your children to have a leg up on the rest of society, get married, stay married, have kids after you're married. That's it. That's the secret. Get married and stay married. And have kids after you get married. And I actually kind of find it remarkable that there's a lot of data showing that in health-wise, this is kind of the craziest thing. There are a number of studies at Marriage Institutes and others that have shown that kids who are raised by a single parent, if the parent is a father, tend to be healthier than every other group. Kids raised by single, this is one of the most fascinating sociological data points in modern society. Kids who have a single parent and that parent is the dad tend to be healthier than everyone else. Can you guess why? When you start to think about it, you suddenly realize why it is. Dads don't want to miss work. Most men are defined by their job. They define themselves by their job. And if they are a single parent, at the slightest hint that a kid is getting sick, the alarm bell goes off that I may have to miss work. And so dads, single dads, tend to proactively take their children to the doctor more than any other demographic. More than a two-parent heterosexual household, more than a two-parent homosexual male household, lesbian household, or a single mom. Single parent dads tend to have healthier kids because at the slightest hint of a runny nose, they're carted off so that dad does not have to miss work with the kid being sick. I would have never known this. There are multiple studies that have shown this. I continue to be fascinated by it, but largely because I'm pretty sure that I would not be that dad. I would be the exception to the rule. My kid's got a running. Go off to school. But here's the thing. It's not privilege if you are raised the way all of human history has suggested you should be raised. To comply with the norm is not privilege. And this is where progressive left-wing crazy culture goes, is that to be raised in a way that you should be raised is somehow a privilege, that you should be deprived of something because you got a privilege other people didn't, which is BS. There are, by the way, it's fairly consistent across races that a mom and a dad raising kids together, non-divorced, is actually stable, whether it's black or Asian or Hispanic or white. That sort of stuff matters. And because of a collapse in society, this is what's happening, because of a collapse in the family structure in society, those who have the family structure are now being viewed as in some way advantaged, that puts everyone else in a negative way because they and their group are somehow doing something other people can't. Pay no attention to the fact how society has incentivized divorce culture and single parent culture. And so now we've got to essentially redistribute things as society has collapsed, which is nonsense. But that's where the left is. And that's where a lot of these schools want to head. And that's why they're going through indoctrination. This is this whole idea of white identity. This is not education. This is indoctrination. The more they're teaching the kids this or distracting the faculty by this, the less they're doing math. And now you've got a story out of Oregon where they're learning about racism in math. They're learning about math is racist. Math is considered a universal language. Only in Western culture, particularly the United States, can we have hand-wringing conversations about racism in mathematics and how maybe 2 + 2 doesn't actually equal 4. Maybe it could equal 5, but it's white identity that requires us to equal 4. You know, if little green men come to Earth, they may call it crap to and crap now, but 2 + 2 is going to equal 4 to them as well, because it is a universal language. Math is about numbers. Numbers themselves are not racist. In fact, we call them Arabic numerals. It was the Arabians who invented algebra. But I guess they were actually white guys then, and it was bad. So none of this makes sense. And this is why, if you can get your child out of a government school, you should. And if in Georgia you can contribute to our Opportunity Scholarship Fund so that other families can get their children out of government schools, you should fund that program to get as many people out of indoctrination programs and back into actual education programs, where we're not going to be crushed by China, because the Chinese don't care about this nonsense. They actually care about getting math right so they can kick our butt. We want to kick China's butt. We need to stop indoctrinating in government-run schools and get back to the basics.
Well connected and well respected. It's
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. I got to play you some audio. This is Aaron Burnett on CNN last night.
Yeah, it's a huge issue for parents. It's a huge issue for women in particular, who are dropping out of the workforce in huge numbers because
I should pause and say that's Gloria Borger talking first.
they're staying home to take care of their kids because they're not in school. So it has all kinds of repercussions. And Biden and his people understand this. I think part of the problem, quite honestly, is that the science disagrees sometimes about how safe it is or how safe it isn't. And
unions, to your point, what the unions are demanding flies in the face of what CDC scientists and other scientists said are necessary, right?
That's
right. So you're pointing out that the issue they have here, if you're going to be the administration of science, then you're going to have to say no to the unions on some of these issues.
That's right. I mean, either you're an administration of science or you're an administration governed by the unions. And if they disagree, you have to figure out where you're going to stand. And you know that the population wants their kids back in school.
Yeah, the population wants their kids back in school. And the Biden administration, have you seen that they pressured the CDC to change their guidelines because the CDC said you go back to school right now, and the teachers union says, oh no. And so the CDC had to walk it all back and say, actually, we're sorry. Nah, we got it wrong. Can't go back now. Here's Ron DeSantis, who is really, man, this guy, he could be president in 4 years. The media spent so much time attacking him and ignoring Andrew Cuomo when DeSantis is the one who got it right.
Florida schools are open for in-person instruction. Every single parent in this state has a right to send their kid to in-person instruction. We have done it the right way. We are not going to turn back. What the CDC put out 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, I wonder why they would do it then, was quite frankly a disgrace. It would require, if you actually followed that, closing 90% of schools in the United States. We have been open, they will remain open, and we are not turning back.
Florida got such a bad rap by the media, mostly because Ron DeSantis has an R next to his name and Andrew Cuomo had a D next to his name. And again, something I spend a lot of time talking about these days is the media at this point is way more focused on narrative than truth. We're seeing this in the situation in Texas, where the narrative is that renewable energy had no responsibility for what happened. And the reality is that the federal government subsidy of wind and solar energy in Texas caused them to overbuild those sorts of power sources and not expand the base load capacity of Texas, even as the state has grown. They boosted natural gas, but not coal or nuclear. And if we're going to get rid of coal, we need to increase nuclear, because the wind doesn't blow sometimes, the sun doesn't shine sometimes, and we don't have the battery tech to be able to store that power in mass scale. But the media wanted to tell a narrative to protect renewable energy. They're doing it in the same way to attack Ron DeSantis for his handling of the virus, and Brian Kemp for that matter, and ignore Andrew Cuomo as best they can. But sometimes the people pay attention. And even, for example, with the school systems now, even reporters like CNN anchors are turning on the teachers unions. Progressive parents writing how they're going to vote Republican at local elections because of the teachers unions. There's clearly something going on, and the media is having to play catch up now because they're not with it.